this operation against Gaza City. They are just leveling neighborhoods. One thing that's not happening is that the people are not leaving. There are over 1 million people in the city. There used to be 700,000, but there are so many refugees from the, other devastated parts of Gaza moved in. So we have over 1 million. Only 100,000 have left, in spite of all the warnings that the IDF has sent and the the leveling of neighborhoods. They've been recently taking out high rises and, blowing up schools and whatever. It's partly just to, what they're trying to do is frighten the population. You see a high rise come down and say, yeah, this is going to happen to you. You better get out of here. But the people aren't moving. And the reason is that they've already, they're refugees many times over. They've gone from one place to another, and they're always told that where you're going, that's going to be safe. That's been declared a safe zone. They're being told now to go to someplace farther south that's a safe zone, but they know it's not a safe zone. Israel regularly bombs it, blows up people in tents there. And they say, we're just not, we've had enough of this. We're staying here. We die if we go there. We die if we stay. Why go? Why get back? We're already weak from hunger. We have... You're going to put us, you're telling us that now we just got to pick up our very few belongings and move to another place where you're going to bomb us again. We're just staying. So only 100,000 of the more than 1 million have left. But Israel continues to, again, to carry forward this operation. And they are in the process of just leveling entire neighborhoods.
So if these people don't leave, they're just going to be killed?
Well, yeah. I mean, if they're in these buildings, Israel's going to flatten them, and whoever's in there is going to die. That's a fact. They're not going to go in there and carry them out. They're not going to. It looks like they're not waiting for them to leave.
So I see some of these pictures of these high rises going down. There's people in those buildings probably still, and
probably. We don't know for sure, but probably.
Yeah, I mean, just a missile strikes it. I don't think Israel cares.
I think, like in the case, there's a particularly dramatic, footage of, one high rise in particular that just was utterly obliterated, just pancaked. And the Israelis, they did issue a warning before they did it. But again, like we're saying, it's like the Palestinians have heard these warnings so many times, and it's just like there's never a safe place to go to. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if a considerable number just ignored it and they ended up being killed in that building. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
That's so crazy. So we have no idea how many people are being killed every day now there if you're talking about 1 million people in a city and Israel's just dropping bombs on it constantly and doing these demolitions and just, ugh.
Yeah, no, it's hard. And again, this is something the Palestinian Health Authority there in Gaza is doing its best to keep a count. But their ability to keep that count has been degraded, just by the constant strikes on healthcare institutions, hospitals, their health workers, and all kinds of civil servants. So they're doing their best, but then also, they, when people end up under the rubble, you don't know. Probably nobody knew how many people were in that building. And so they can't really give a count. You can estimate, but that's it. That's not part of the count. The count is actually that the health authorities give is really very conservative and very careful. They have to have, actual names and in the case of Gaza City, where again, I think they have almost no presence. It's just very hard for them to keep track of what's happening there.
Oh my goodness. So you don't think there's going to be any ceasefire? There's not going to be any pause?
It's not impossible. It looks like so far, Netanyahu has held firm. He seems to be to have resolved to go ahead with this operation, Gideon's chariots too. But the pressures are real. The pressures within Israel and, from foreign governments, they're real. And he may figure something out where he can agree to it. And the thing is, like we've seen in the past, he has agreed to ceasefires in the past, but But first of all, like even during the ceasefire, there were many, many breaches of the ceasefire. The number of killings went down, but they never stopped. The promised deliveries were the deliveries that were promised, never actually materialized. That kind of thing, and I suspect that's what we're going to find again. He'll commit many, many violations of the ceasefire. And then when it's over and he gets his prisoners of war back, he'll start things up again.
What about the West Bank? Is it going to, there's all this talk about they're going to go ahead and annex it. But then I saw that the UAE said that we're going to tear up the Abrams Accord and you'll never integrate into the region if you take the West Bank. And I don't know if that's actually paused them, because part of my mind is like, if you're Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and Smotrich, or just if you're an Israeli, you know that you're never going to integrate in the region. After this, it's impossible, right? They can't just integrate, so. Right? So, I mean, like, do you think they care what the UAE says? Do they think they really care about the Abrams Accord and that will...
Yeah. Well, they might. I mean, the fact is, the question should be, why hasn't the UAE torn up the agreement already in light of the atrocities in Gaza?
Saudi Arabia as well, all these countries.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, they have condemned them, et cetera, but they essentially have, kind of maintained the relationship that they have with Israel. And it should have ended. It should have ended, prior to October 7th, but certainly, after the launch of this genocidal campaign by Israel. But it's still there. So, but yeah, it seems like that caused the Israelis to pull back somewhat, at least. But the pressure to annex the West Bank is very powerful, within Netanyahu's coalition. And I think this is something that he wants to do himself, but he's also promised to his coalition partners. And the rumors is that Trump himself has promised to approve an annexation of the West Bank. So, we'll see. But it looks like, at this time he decided, okay, maybe we're doing too much too fast. Let's pull back on this, or at least slow down, or let's not be so open about what we're doing. The fact is, like, ever since October 7th, there has been an acceleration of the ethnic cleansing of the West Bank. Yeah, it's not, the number of deaths and the amount of destruction, pales in comparison to what's happening in Gaza. But there's been a real acceleration. That had always been going on, but it's just, tripled, quadrupled in speed. They're just taking a lot more land and driving a lot more people off of the land. And talking more openly about annexation.
I mean, I think what everybody wants to see is some forces to act against Israel, to stop against it. But are we starting to see some of those build up? I know we have, for example, at least for the people of Gaza, there's a flotilla now. I think it has more than 50 ships from over 44 countries that's on its way. Right. Like, could you think, is this reached a big enough level where that can break through, and that, or if they stop all the ships, that this will damage relations with enough countries around the world that we'll start to see some real action, real consequences? Or if if they annex the West Bank, I just don't think that the Muslim world will just sit by. I mean, I've been very disappointed in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Egypt, just their Turkey, right? That they will say, oh, it's horrible. And they're right next door, but they don't do anything. And Turkey still keeps on pumping gas into Israel, and they keep on doing trade. And they Egypt still has that border, and they're just not doing anything. But if they take the West Bank, I mean, Al-Aqsa Mosque is there. That thing it will be cut off from the Muslim world, if Israel takes over that. I don't think there has to be an uprising at some point. I just wonder it's amazed me how far Israel's been able to go without any type of real uprising, real pushback. But it has to get to a point. And I feel like when that dam breaks, it will break. Then it'll be boof. Everybody knows, like, okay, now it's time to be on the right side of history. Sorry, whoever won first and upright, now everybody's pouring in, and Israel's screwed.
Yeah. Well, you would think that there is a breaking point. And, you would have thought that we would have actually encountered it earlier. It would have occurred earlier, but it's still somewhere in the future. I don't know how far in the future. But this strong statement by UAE, I think, is an indication that that Israel, there is a limit to what they can put up with. Even among Israel's covert friends, there is a limit. And I think part of it is that they understand that their own people can only be pushed so far. At some point they're going to have some real political problems at home.
Right. Well, I feel like in Netanyahu and his regime, they are testing those limits and they're going to break them. Right. I mean, they has to. I don't think they're going to stop. Right. They can't stop. What's happening in Gaza City right now, as this escalates, we're talking about. We've seen so much horrible footage that it just can't be hidden, and it's on mainstream news, and it's going to get worse if we're talking about 1 million people there. They're just going to be. I don't know how many are just going to be crushed to death. Children screaming for their mothers while they're being crushed. It's going to be just so awful. I think that will push just the world position on this to it's already at a boiling point. It's going to boil over, and then if they take the West Bank too, But he's going to do that, right? It
looks like that's the way we're headed. And then, actually, I think Israel understands that they have suffered from all those images and negative press. They can't stop it entirely, but they've made an effort. They've killed, by some counts, 250
Yeah, I've heard like 300.
More than like in all the wars of the 20th century combined. And that's one count. The lowest count, the most conservative count, puts it like at 196 or something. But that, it's clear that's deliberate. Like again, even more information's come out about the killing of 5 journalists at the hospital, and even Reuters, which is, just was refused to outright condemn it. They've actually come back. They did their own investigation and said it was clear that so-called Hamas camera was their own camera that had always been there, and.
It's still not an excuse, even if it was. It's like, who cares? It's a camera.
Right. You're going to kill these journalists, or and strike a hospital. So even it was, but it wasn't. And the thing is, they knew it wasn't because it had been there for weeks. The journalists had been there. That was like one of their established posts. The journalists were there. It was because the journalists were there, and because they do understand how the footage, the images that are getting out from Gaza is hurting them. So one solution from the Israeli point of view is actually just to kill the journalists and destroy their cameras. Of course they can't stop it. People have phones, and there's still ways of getting the images out. But it'll be, they have made a deliberate effort to reduce this flow of images, and that's part of the diabolical plan.
What's so scary is to think about, like said, they reduce this flow of images, and I'm sure they've done it very well, but they have done so much death and destruction, carnage, that they can't stop it all. But it just makes you think, like, we've seen so many painful, horrible, heart-wrenching scenes, and that's just a fraction of what we actually see. Just
of what actually happened.
Of what actually happens, right? I mean, just seeing a picture of a father holding his just the head of his 7-year-old boy in his hands. I saw that. I see that stuff. And it's just so great. Just the head, his head, just crying and saying, "Sorry, I couldn't protect you from these missiles." It's just so horrible, so awful, and it was just I don't know. I'm at a loss. I'm always at a loss. It's just like, how do we as humanity sit by and let this happen and say that it's we all know it's wrong. We all know it's wrong, and I just always felt like we grew up learning about the Holocaust and genocide and how awful this is, and that it would never happen. We would never let this happen again, and it's happening. And no one's doing anything. And it's amazing to me that it's the most documented genocide of all time, when we have statements directly from Israeli officials saying that we're going to kill them all, when we have polls from Israeli society saying that the majority of them, 72% or something, or 82% think that, we got to get rid of all of them in Gaza. It's just, this is, I just don't understand how we could have such a blatant genocide from our eyes, and there's so few Western leaders that could admit it. Because even if it's, sure, I understand you're captured, but I just thought that you would understand that you need to be on the right side of history, that you don't want to be associated with a genocide. And the lengths of capture and the power of the Israelis and the Zionists over the Western world, Western society, I think has shocked all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't disagree. Well,
I'm just thinking like this power, this Zionist power, because especially we see it in the media. Just how the media, you can see how they're having trouble trying to report on Gaza because they don't want to say Israel killed these 100 children died in Gaza. Just somehow that happened. And it's destroying all these institutions. All these institutions of Zionist power are being used, but they are destroying them. But when this is all over, and these media institutions and Zionist control over Western English media begins to crumble and collapse, and it's being replaced by something else. What happens to all this power, this Zionist power, this Jewish power? Will they be able to retain it and then replace it and build something else up? Or because it seems like, I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole, but it seems like this power seems to kind of pop up again and again historically, right? I mean, we hear about these things, what happened in Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution, what happens in Germany in the 1920s. It's just like, what happens to this Jewish power? Will it just relocate, and will they do the same thing again?
Well, yeah, that's a huge question, and I don't have an answer for it.
I want it to be removed. I'm saying, sorry, you guys can't have this power anymore. But just because we see what happens when they happen.
Right. Well, there are different things that can happen, and one thing is there could be real anti-Semitism, real backlash against the Jewish people as a group as a consequence of this. I think there's a real risk to that. And again, this is something that I know I discussed with Garland Nixon recently. It's just that, and this is partly the very conscious doing of people like Netanyahu, who constantly conflate Judaism with Zionism and insist that any criticism of Zionism is anti-Semitic. This has been the Zionist, in the Zionist playbook for a long time, but it's, they're using it now. It's increasingly become obvious, how false this conflation. But he insists on it, and other supporters of Zionism insist on it. It's like their main argument is you can't possibly, criticize Zionism. If you do, you're an anti-Semite. That gets thrown around again and again. Everything's anti-Semitic. We hear it from the Trump administration, and from Keir Starmer and others who are all these people are very, very fervid Zionists. But by conflating the two, what you risk doing is creating real anti-Semitism in the future, and meaning that if you continually insist that they're one and the same, then you may actually succeed in convincing a lot of people that they are one and the same. Say, okay, yeah, Jews are just Zionists, and Zionists are Jews, and so Jews are responsible. They're all guilty of the genocide, and so we could have potentially real anti-Semitism in the future. There could be that backlash, and it would be, I think, largely thanks to the efforts of the Zionists themselves. So, yeah, that's one possibility that might happen.
Yeah. Well, the problem is,
the thing, of course, it would be unfair, especially among younger Jews that are clearly moving away from Zionism and the Zionist project, and that may be. I don't know, what kind of break. Is there some other cause that Jewish people will take up in the future? I don't know. Maybe it's going to be the end of let's say the Jewish ethnic bloc as such. That I think a lot of Jews are saying that actually I don't even really want to be identified as a Jew anymore. This is something, okay, yeah, I had a bar mitzvah or whatever, but because of the association of it, it's just like, this is not an identity that I really want to affirm. Quite the opposite. I want to reject, and you see that, I think. Again, among many, many Jews, especially younger Jews in other countries.
Yeah, so you think there'll be just sort of an outright rejection of Judaism among some Jews already because of this association that Israel is doing, tying their religion to the state of Israel, to Zionism.
Right. Yeah, again, I'm not Jewish myself, so I kind of am reluctant to get too deep into that kind of thing, because I know sometimes I hear people talking about, like they pretend they know what Christianity is all about, and I know that they don't. So, I'm just making, this is comments of an outsider, but it's just based on things that I've seen. And I think these comments are true as far as they go. One thing too is just for a lot of Jews, I would think the majority in the U.S. and in Europe are secular. So they're not adherents to Judaism per se. They just have a Jewish ethnic identity. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's weak. But because it's become so strongly, intertwined with Zionism, I think the natural response for a lot of people who, principled Jews who don't support Zionists, that reject it emphatically, is that they end up actually, their own Jewish identity is actually becomes less and less important to them, and in fact something that they want to separate themselves from. I don't know the extent of that, but there's no question in my mind that that's happening to some extent.
Mm-hmm, for sure. What I think is happening now in this country is that the Zionists understand they have a real problem. So I think they're trying to really ramp up Islamophobia in the English language, just throughout the English-speaking world. And I think they've been relatively effective. I can see it. I can see it on X. It's the idea that we are, it's part of this idea of defending Western civilization. And it's like, okay, we got to, we're being invaded by Muslims, and it's Christians and Jews versus Muslims. It seems like this is a coordinated, planned operation.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
True. I mean, that's just something that long, antedates October 7th. I think that has clearly been a strategy of the Zionists for a long, long time. Yeah. Again, Netanyahu, made the famous comment that actually September 11th was good for the Jews, and because that gave him a lot of ammunition to say, your enemy is the Muslims, and we stand by your side. We're like the brave outposts against Islam. That's something that they have, that's something that they have emphasized again and again and again, and I think with a great deal of success. Now, the idea that Christians should be tied to them, that there's a problem there, because they actually, within the Middle East, really don't differentiate between Christians and Muslims within Palestine. They've been blowing up, I think I heard last count, like they've destroyed 800 mosques, but they've also destroyed, there are just a few churches in Gaza, but they haven't spared them either. They've killed people, they've struck them with missiles, and the Palestinians themselves, Palestinian Christians, will all tell you that it's like, the settlers go after them in the same way that they go after the Muslim Palestinians. They do not differentiate. But the Christian Zionists, by and large, almost entirely, with a very few exceptions, look the other way and pretend that, the Jews are standing, shoulder to shoulder with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned how Netanyahu said that 9/11, this was great for Israel. This is great for Israel. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go down the 9/11 route a little bit? I don't. Maybe we can save it for another one.
Yeah, let's do that some other time. Yeah, because I think we're coming towards the end of this.
Okay, true. Yeah. But that's something I have my own opinions on it. We've all seen the Dance Israelis. All right, we won't get into it. We'll save it for later. But I think that's. I just don't trust Israel, man. I don't trust them with anything. Okay. All right, Dad.